And this is yet another opportunity to showcase, but also to strengthen our collaboration for the future. We all know about the important changes, these deep and civilization-wide changes that we need to make in order to act promptly to the issue of climate change. And we also know that these changes that are needed are impacting very strongly the local level in particular, and in particular those that are most vulnerable among our population. Cities are, of course, at the front line. We heard it several times, I think, in the past day, and it's important to also be reminded of that. And of course, they can't just deal with this enormous challenge on their own. They need to stimulate partnership. We need to work together across sectors, across level, and of course to try to push forward simultaneous transitions across the different systems to really reach the pace and the scale of change that we need. Now, there is a good news in all of this, and the good news is that we have already options available from a technological point of view to halve our emissions by 2030. And it's also a good news that already over 13,500 cities across the world have signed up to the Global Covenant of Mayors, committing not only to set ambitious targets, but also to implement on the ground measures for resilience and for decarbonization. So amplifying this collaboration and empowering cities by helping them to future-proof their journey and on their vision to net zero is the core goal of our urban transition mission that I have the pleasure to represent here today. And the goal with this mission is to really try to bring together different levels, different sectors, different types of partner to support cities by fostering capacity building, by providing opportunity to exchange with one another, but also by brokering solutions. And this is what we are going to be zooming in today. We want to zoom in more closely into how solutions approaches can help us bridge the gap in terms of what our cities are needing across the world for the transition, and also how we can collectively empower cities across the world to adopt these solutions in a way that can also be helping us to move from a pilot logic to the scale that is needed for change. So for the past year, we have been working with a cohort of 48 ambitious cities that have been engaging with us on this very challenging, but also very inspiring journey. One of them will be, two of them actually, apologies, will be on stage with us today, one virtually and one on here in presence, so you will hear from them in just a couple of minutes. But although we have just been working together for 1 year, we collectively have been trying to broker solutions, support each other, learn and advance our climate action journey to reduce a collective impressive amount of 21,635 tons of CO2 equivalent. And just to give you a sense, this is equivalent to almost 3,000 round trips between Miami and Newcastle in Australia. So quite a large amount of potential there. So this is just the beginning. And we are actually very happy to mention already from now that another 49 cities have joined our mission. So we are doubling our size and doubling our commitment. And that, of course, we are standing ready to continue this important cooperation across sectors and across the board. So with all of this as a backdrop, today we want to offer a platform for discussion and to ensure that we can talk more practically about what are the challenges the cities are facing to reach net zero resilient future, and how can we collaborate to advance their journey. We will focus on the need for an expanded innovation space that brings together all of these different partners, but also for the importance of highlighting and kind of pinpointing new solutions that can really help us to also satisfy the core human needs that these cities are trying to secure for the quality of life and the well-being of their own citizens. So you will hear a number of concrete examples. You will hear some inspiring visions that are being co-designed by our cities here every day through their work. And then we will also zoom in into the role that they can have to actually develop, co-create, not only to test, but really to be a game changer when it comes to innovation, closing this gap between what do we need from a research point point of view, what do we need in terms of deployment of solutions, and how do we get to the scale that we need for that. So it is my pleasure to now welcome on stage my panelists. I would like to call upon Massamba Thioye. I think you all know him very well, but he is the project executive of the UN Climate Change Global Innovation Hub. Hi, Massamba, thank you for being with us. I would like to go remotely on screen where you can see a dear colleague and friend, Mark Atherton. He's the Director of Environment of the Greater Manchester Authority from the United Kingdom. Hello, Mark. Thank you for being connected with us today. It's also a pleasure for me to welcome on stage Anvita Arora. She's a Program Director in the King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center, KAPSARC. Thank you, Anvita, for being with us. I also would like to welcome on stage Mayor Mohamed Sefiani, the Mayor of Chefchaouen, Morocco. And then I'm also delighted to welcome on stage another dear friend that is very, very far back in the room, Jon Verbeek, Senior Manager of Sustainability and ESG at KPMG. Hi, Jorn, welcome. And I'm going to take a seat with you. Thank you very much for joining us today. And in my introduction, I already mentioned not only the visions, the ambitions, but also the concrete steps the cities are taking to try to reach the objectives of a more sustainable future for their community. Innovation is what the UN Climate Change Global Innovation Hub is all about, and in particular, to innovate by responding to the core human needs and the need really to kind of have the disruptive approach, right, to partnerships. Can you tell us a little bit why do we need this type of radical collaboration to really foster systemic change, Massamba?
Thank you. Thank you, and good morning to all of you. And again, as you have mentioned, we are very pleased to have this collaboration between the UN Climate Change Global Innovation Hub and UTM, because at the Global Innovation Hub, we believe that cities are really the change maker, and this is why your initiative is extremely important for us. So if we want to address the climate and sustainability challenge that we are facing, we need to adopt systemic approach to innovation. The traditional approach to innovation that is characterized by linear innovation is not appropriate when it comes to climate and sustainability innovation. It has to be replaced by a more interactive innovation. Also, the approach of product push innovation, where you develop a product and then you look for use cases, will not work for climate and sustainability solution. Innovation needs to be demand-driven. You have to first establish the needs for climate and sustainability solution, and these needs will drive innovation. And finally, we have to move away from what I will call closed innovation, where you innovate in silo, to a more open innovation that call for radical collaboration. So radical collaboration is important for several reasons. The first is related to the complexity of the challenge that we are trying to address, and that require actually the contribution of a broad range of stakeholders. It's not just about innovative technology, but it's also about innovative policy instrument, innovative business model, innovative financial instrument, innovative cooperative approach, because we are not collaborating enough, as well as innovative product from the culture and creative industry. So innovative business model is very important, because this is actually what will enable the radical collaboration that is required. Because if we say all these different entities are needed for the change to happen, we need to find a way to bring them together, make them collaborate radically, and it can only happen if you are able to come up with innovative business model, meaning being able to bring this group of people that do not have necessarily the same interest and being able to create or maximize the creation of value for each of them. That's actually what will enable the radical collaboration to happen. And finally, to conclude, the transition that we are looking for require a lot of resources. So it means that we need to pool resources. So it means that also we need to radically collaborate, bring together the resources so that we can make the transition.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Masamba, for sharing your thoughts and also for guiding us a little bit the thinking around why do we need to foster this radical collaboration. I really like that already from now you're setting the scene saying it's not just about technology. It's about changing the way that we do things. It's about collaboration. It's about regulatory framework. It's about enabling our transition also with solutions that can cope with the social needs that we have on the ground. So that's wonderful. I would like to now go quickly to our cities because we have been talking about this vision for decarbonization and for climate neutrality. How does this radical collaboration fit into that? And before I give you the floor, Mayor Sefiani, we have another mayor that has joined us, and I apologize for the delay in finding the venue. It's we are all running here, COP today. We would like to keep you on your toes. So it's my pleasure to welcome here on stage the Mayor of Kitwe, Zambia, Mayor Mpaza Mwaya. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being with us. So maybe, Mayor Sefiani, I will start with you then with this question. If you don't mind, give us a glimpse of your vision and the challenges that you are facing in fostering these cooperations.
Thank you very much, Georgia. I agree with my friend, Masaba, because cities are a great role and a great responsibility to implement the climate agenda. For example, in my city, we have political engagement. We work with participatory approach with civil society and other leaders in the city, and we join the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy to have a good practice and sharing best experience between cities. We have our climate action plan. We have our vision 2030. We are joining Race to Zero and Race to Resilience, and we began to implement. But we have challenges, many challenges. We have a gap between what we want and what we can do on the ground. We don't, as the intermediary city in the north of Morocco, and as many intermediary cities in the global south, perhaps in all the world, we have these challenges. And challenges because we don't have sufficient human resources. We don't have sufficient expertise. We don't know what happens in other cities that have a good experience, a good practice. And we don't have easy technical assistance to have easy access to direct finance. So the ambition is here, the planification is here. We are implementing, we are not stopping, but we need to have another speed and another energy to implement our climate. It's why when we saw the call of urban mission transition, we say we must join this global initiative, and we were one of the first 48 cities in the world joining us. And when we saw the UN Climate Global Initiative Hub, we were the 11 cities who joined this initiative. Why? because we know that is a space, is a great opportunity for us as mayors of elected city to have this technical assistance, to have this capacity building for us as elected, for our employees, for civil society, to how to implement our projects, our programs, our climate agenda. And now is many meetings, many sessions of building capacity and technical assistance that we have. And thank you again for your support. I finish not because I know many panelists will give us many input, and we will learn from other panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor Sufiani. And if you allow me to quote you, you always say that the key ingredient here is implementation, implementation, implementation. And I think this innovation space to respond to the needs of your community is exactly the place where the support for that implementation needs to come from. I would like to go to Mayor Mwaye first to understand a little bit about the vision that your city has, but also what are the challenges both in your pathway to becoming a decarbonized, climate neutral municipality, but also a resilient one. And I already want to point to Anvita to let you know that after that I'm going to come to you to ask a little bit what can research do to help these different processes. Please.
Thank you very much for having me, and it's a pleasure to have this discussion alongside Mayor and other experts. So we are safe because we have experts here to answer to our challenges. I come from Kitwe in Zambia, and Kitwe is a mining town. So my vision is to have, as much as possible, significant reduction of emissions from the mine industry, and as well as from the commercial industries in the district. At the same time, my vision is also to have an improved solid waste management, because we have realized that poor waste management and just taking the waste to the dump sites, that is where we are storing a lot of emissions, even more toxic or hazardous than carbon, such as methane. So our vision is to work in collaboration with the regulation agency as much as possible to have the mines reduce on their emissions on the environment. The challenge that is posing, whilst we may have that vision, is that we are currently under a centralized system. So you find that even the same regulation agency, environmental management agency that is supposed to regulate the industries as well as the mines, report directly to central government. But me at local government, it's parallel. So I do not control the agencies so that I can have that. So some of the gaps that I have right now are the fact that we don't have data. So the fact that the controlling agency, environmental management agency, reports directly, it means us as a local authority and as a city, we lack data in order for us to bridge the gaps. And then also, the poor waste management, it's based so much on behavioral issues. And as long as we are under a centralized system, at the local authority, me as mayor, I may want to put in regulations to say everyone must subscribe to a garbage collector, or everyone must separate their garbage at source, so that that which goes to the environment, to the dump site, is reduced, and then we can have waste recyclers. So at the moment, we have those challenges because of the gaps and also the lack of data and the poor waste management systems. But we are looking up to such platforms for hope. We have hope that with engagements such as these ones, we may just get hope from the innovators so that we can have partners and be helped in setting up recycling plants, and as well as the waste segregation, even capacity buildings at the local authority. I think at this point I'll pause a little bit and just see how best I can be helped, but I can come back for more clarifications if need be.
Thank you very much. So Anvita, I'll go to you. We talked about here already a number of different challenges across the board, but there is also a great potential in these challenges, especially if we are trying to respond to these in a systemic manner. What do you feel is the role of innovation and the role of academia and research to support these processes? And Mark, I have not forgotten about you. I come to you next.
So thank you very much, Georgia. And it's such a pleasure to be along with the cities where the real stuff is happening. You know, I know people think that academics sit in an ivory tower, but there is a purpose that we serve. So I think the value that we have as academics or innovators is that we are zoomed out a little bit. So we have a more holistic perspective of a lot of stuff that's happening. The cities have, I think the biggest challenge is there are a lot of competing priorities. There are many things to do. So, I mean, at the city authority level, you have to provide for infrastructure, access to livelihood, the road should be fine, you know. You have your day-to-day jobs that you need to do. From the top level, what they are having is, okay, climate action, what are you doing in climate action? What is happening in the SDGs? How are you measuring it? How you are reporting it? Now, I think where research and innovation helps to do, what we are able to do is create a framework. Create a framework which can help you to reconcile all of these competing priorities and then do a scenario analysis. So, for example, you need to give access to livelihood. That is an important priority. You need to create safe public spaces. That is an important priority. We need to reduce emissions. So for that, vehicle kilometers. So there's a lot to do. Now, if there is a framework that allows you to measure all of this, so you'd say, okay, if I build bicycle lanes, does it tick all the boxes, for example? You know, it will help you to give better access to livelihood, better public spaces, safer access, reduce the emissions, create inclusive mobility. So there are all of these things. So I think what a framework allows the policymakers is to look at scenario analysis and say that if I have X amount of money to spend, how can I spend it to create the biggest bang, you know? And if I put this infrastructure, it ticks climate action, it ticks SDG 11, it ticks SDG 12, it ticks, you know, so we are able to really put all of that together and allow policymakers to create better decisions in that sense. So I think that is where a more holistic frameworks to support urban transitions through the climate change, through the implementation of SDGs and other ambitions that the cities have is helpful.
Thank you very much, Anvita. And I have to say, we are very excited as an Urban Transition Mission to be able to work with CAPSARC. Yeah. And a little sneak preview, we have some ideas, in particular, to support cities in the Global South around coping with extreme temperatures, cities that are rapidly urbanizing, expanding. So more to be seen from our cooperation. But also, thank you very much for flagging the importance of research and innovation in creating this framework to learn better. The Urban Transition Mission is working very closely in partnership with the Innovate for Cities program, exactly to try to find out how can we not only map the gaps that are still existing in research, but what boxes have we already ticked somehow, and what can we further in the future? So hopefully this conversation, the work with our cities, will be the basis also for that type of analysis and for furthering also the collaboration with research. Now I'm going to Mark, because Mark, I think several of these different let's say, sectors have already been mentioned, and policies and measures that need to be implemented at the same time, right, have been mentioned. So can I ask you, from Greater Manchester perspective, what are the key core human needs / priorities that you see, and where does the penny drop? Yeah? What do you need to do? What do you need to do next?
So thank you, Georgia, and thank you for inviting me to speak on such an august panel. I think this is a really interesting question. I was taken by Masamba's view of radical collaboration. I think that that's absolutely right. We do need to try and collaborate in a different way. And it's not just collaboration around technology, it's specifically in our case around financial viability of projects. So to give you a little bit of background, Greater Manchester has a carbon neutral by 2038 target. We've set out a systemic approach to try and achieve that. We have local air energy plans that cover all of our districts, and the local energy plans really focus on two key aspects. One is around shelter, core human need of shelter, and the other is around transport infrastructure, because they're where our two largest emissions are, the heat that's used to heat our homes and the transport that's used in our cars to move us around the city. Of course, because it's a systemic approach, we don't just look at those two, we have to look across the board. And what we found is that a lot of the things that we need to try and do are starting to drop into place. So as Ms. Mercifonia said, a lot of the technology is now starting to come, but it is either not efficient enough or not cost effective enough to make a lot of projects viable. So we need to continue to improve the efficiency of the technologies we are holding. Secondly, though, and this is where our biggest challenge lies, we've worked out that to deliver our local energy plans will cost 64 billion euro, which 70% of that is business as usual. So that drops it down to about 19 billion euro. And of that 19 billion, around 5 to 9 billion is within local authority control. So it's a huge amount of funding that we need to find to make the transition happen just from local government. And we can't do that alone. So now what we need to do is look at the different asset classes that we need to invest in, whether they are our social homes, electric vehicle charging, public transport, public buildings, or even local renewable energy generation. And for each of those asset classes, work out how we can bring in private sector investment that is long-term in nature and is patient. Because we need to invest now, and we need to invest at scale now, but we need investors that are prepared to wait for their return over what may be a decade or more. And so the real challenge for us at the moment is around financial innovation, and also that the way we deliver needs to change, because I think, as one of them has already said, there's a capacity issue, and we need to be able to scale up our capacity to be able to deliver. And we see that as creating a new, maybe more than one delivery vehicle, again with the private sector, to support local economic growth through some form of joint venture or special purpose vehicle. To get the public sector working with the private sector, we collaborate very well with our academics as well. So I quite like the oversight and the data rigidity that can come from working with our academic colleagues, and bring all of that together to deliver systemic change over the next few years.
Thank you very much, Mark, for sharing clear numbers and clear priorities of where Greater Manchester is going. I think that both the issue around providing shelter, good quality of life for residents of buildings, and the issue of ensuring that there is a public transport that can serve and allow people to move and to access school, their jobs in a sustainable manner are essential. These are also two of the most difficult sectors for local governments to work with, and the one that are responsible of largest amount of the missions that we have at the local level. So I would like to go to Jorn now, because we've been hearing from Mark that we need to do things a little bit different. There is a public budget that can be allocated to this, but the partnership with the private sector is very important too. How do we need to change the relationship between the private and the public sector? What's the innovation here that we need to unlock that potential?
Thank you, Georgia. And I think it remains the $1 million question. I mean, the fact that we see many familiar faces in the room, I think is the fact that we start to build trust, but also the fact that we keep iterating on that question on how do we move forward. I think today is Cities Day, so I'm really honored to sit between two mayors. I think it's important, as we've seen tomorrow with the launch of the CHAMP initiative, that there's attention for multi-level action, that we start to look at the relationship between local and national governments, but also that we start to look at a multi-actor perspective, or keep looking at that. And I mean that we look at a city, and again this morning we said 70–80% of the investment should come from private sector, but I think we should also acknowledge that then 70 or 80% often, and we can discuss numbers, in a city is also owned or managed or invested by the private sector. And I think, therefore, we need mayors to have that vision, to have that narrative, to have that community building. But I think we also need to look in actors from the private sector to say, this is also your mission, this is also your city. How are we going to do that together? And it's not by listing challenges and to say, can you please invest? It's by co-creating solutions and saying, this is our common challenge. And that for me leads to the question, and when I was listening to some of the speakers and also to Mark, how do we define value? How do we define responsibility, accountability? And let me give two examples. If you look at regulation, you can either look at regulation as you need it for compliancy. You can look at a mayor's ambition to say, I set an agenda. But you should also look on what is actually the accountability that we want to put on the table from both public and private sector. The other part on value, listening to Mark, there was a study launched earlier this week where we see that in the UK, for example, 80% of the homes need retrofitting if you want to make them aligned with 1.5. We also see that 80% of the people in the UK don't have more savings than £5,000 on their bank account. And there the question of value is extremely important. We can say we need a longer time frame, but it's also thinking, if we talk about in Europe CSRD taxonomy, how are we going to monetize those societal values? Who wants to pay today for air pollution? Who wants to pay for avoiding health costs? These elements are really crucial to take into account, to look at the regulatory framework and say, how do we meet in the middle? How do we design new business and value models where not only the financial return on investment isn't taken into account, but also the societal return on investment. And that's really important where public and private sector should meet to design that long-term vision. It's not only being 1.5 aligned by 2030, 2040, or 2050, it's also to understand what's the value we want to see at the end of the day to create those healthy, clean, and inclusive cities that we want to see.
Thank you very much, Jorn. Maybe I'll go back to you, Anvita. Answering this, maybe I'll kind to build upon the question that Jorn is just posing there. How do we design this new value? How do we monetize on social value? What is the role of research in helping us navigate this very important question? And what is the role also of the aggregation of demand of our cities to make sure that we are furthering this very important question for the future?
So I think the role of research is at multiple levels. The first that I talked about was creating a framework where we identify the priorities, where we are identifying what are the short-term action plan, long-term action plan, where can we put the money now, what are the co-benefits, what are the benefits. So putting all of that framing in place. The second thing, and I was struck also by a lot of issues that were coming out, was finding innovative ways to cover for data that is missing. And I think, for example, we did some work in CAPSAC where we didn't have data on traffic, right? But we were able to look at satellite data on night lights, to look at economic activities and find a proxy for the traffic data. So looking at different types of, say, remote sensing, GIS, and different type of other data or innovative data collection techniques and bringing them in to help to support cities in not going through that whole tough process of collecting that data and then simulating the methodology and then coming out with policy, but finding some shortcuts to that and something which is sustainable and low cost, because there is a lot of technology right now that is available. So I think research and innovation really helps to cover a lot of those gaps. And then also helping prioritize. So for example, we have a process called the life cycle analysis approach. Right. If you look at a life cycle analysis approach, if you have to look at two competing technologies that the city can adopt, for example, should you have a hydrogen-powered car or an electric car or a fuel cell car, or, if you have multiple technologies you want to adopt, one is that, okay, what is going to emit less on the spot? But if you look at a life cycle based approach, where are you getting the minerals from? Where are you, what is the supply chain? How far it has to move? What is the labor cost? If you put everything in place, then the cities have a real sense of what is the cost and what is the value you're going to get out of it. So being really able to, build those kind of value chains and support the cities in the research and innovation can really bring both data, processes, comparative analysis of technologies, these kind of support for cities to make more informed decisions around these.
Thank you. And I think that the data challenge is still a very urgent one in a lot of different countries. And even where we have to say more data-rich local governments, very often there is lack of capacity to utilize, digest, use this data for forecasting. But maybe we can tell a little bit more about that in a few minutes, also discussing with Jorn. Masamba, can I go to you quickly? Because we talked about value chains here. But I know that one of the things that the Global Innovation Hub wants to do is to think about alternative value chains. So can I ask you a little bit about that, but also what is the role of this integrated lens that we want to apply in help us identify this return on investment from a social point of view?
Yeah, the Global Innovation Hub is focusing on the core human needs. Our question is not how actually we decarbonize a given sector, because this can only lead to incremental change. You will not change the product, but you will try somehow to improve its carbon footprint. That's good. It's part of the toolbox, but we need to be mindful that it will not be enough. If we really would like to address the challenge of climate and sustainability, we need to go back to the core human needs the product and services are satisfying, and ask ourselves how actually how actually innovation can contribute in satisfying this core human need in a way that is aligned with the climate and sustainability goal. So it means that innovation in this case will have to disrupt entire value chain. But we want the transition to a green economy to be inclusive, and we want a just transition with nobody being left behind. This is why the solution that will disrupt entire value chain will need to be designed in a way that they can accommodate the repurposing of the knowledge and skill of those that are operating in the disrupted value chain, but it needs also to facilitate the accommodation. It needs also to accommodate the repurposing of the asset that are in this disrupted value chain. So by doing so, you avoid the stranded people and social failure, and you avoid stranded asset and economic failure.
Thank you very much. I think it's important to always think about this core human needs perspective, because ultimately what local governments do as a mission is to try to really serve the needs of their community. So I think it's the right lens to apply to a sustainable development. And I'm actually moving there in the center to be closer to all of you. I feel like I'm there in the corner. So and I would like to go to our mayors and to our city representatives here, because we heard a little bit the perspective of research. We heard a little bit the perspective also of what type of questions are open in the collaboration with the private sector. If you had a wish list for a next step, what would you like innovators, research, private sector to do for you right now to help you achieve some of the core human needs that you have in mind? What would you like to see happening? Is it more collaboration? Is it specific solutions? Mayor Sefiani, can you give us a start?
Yes. I believe in multi-level and multi-actors governance and action, climate action. Because alone, as a city, we can implement what we want to implement it. So, for example, for private sector, for me, and we have one experience, PPP is very, very important. And now we are in process of implementation of one waste management with the valorization, the production of energy, reuse of water. In that, there are projects, and the national government and the regional government will support us, but we need more innovative solutions in that. The modern innovative solutions that exist in the world. I think, and the private sector and the research organization can help us, can give us these solutions. So is one aspect. Second aspect, mobility. Mobility is a new item in Morocco, in the north of Africa. e-mobility, sustainable mobility. So for us is one item that we are discussing in the working groups, in our meetings, and we know is a need. As you know, my city is a touristic city, is a growth. So we receive many cars, many tourists. So we must manage better the mobility in the city, and alone we can't do it. And private sector and multi-level action with the support of government, of international organizations, of regional government can be very useful for us. And I think that's two items is very urgent for us.
Thank you very much. I think especially this point on mobility that you are making, it is about collaboration. You need to engage, especially if we are trying to go more electric. We need to make sure that our grids are ready. We need to make sure that we have demand management in place. We need to make sure that we have storage. And you need to work with the regulators at the national level. You need to work with DSO, TSO. So absolutely, I think this is a very concrete example of how we need partnership to unlock our future energy system. Mayor Mwaya, can I go to you to ask the same question?
Yes, please. I think to begin with, I need to partner with the private sector to help in improving the solid waste management system in the district. But of course, the private sector themselves are expecting me to do some basics as a local authority. And in this case, the huge challenge is about having an engineered landfill. Because right now, we are just harvesting waste. We are not reducing it, we are not recycling it, we are not even, what's the other R? So they need a certain functionality to a certain percentage. They want to see a local authority. So this is where now we need to come to the fact of funding. When we get funding, maybe from other mayors, we are saying, I was with mayor, that when donors, UTMs, and others are donating to a country, for example, they want to go to central government. We want to see a situation where small projects can be funded at local level. In my case, if I get funded, if I received funding for an engineered landfill, I believe it would be a very huge step in order for me to have partnerships with the private sector that can also partner in recycling. Then at the same time, we need project research and behavioral interventions and this needs funding. If I'm going to sensitize my community, fact is my district is 70%, 60% unplanned settlement, and that's where we have the huge numbers. So in unplanned settlement, that is where there's really a waste challenge. So they will just dump the waste anywhere. But for me to sensitize that much of the population, I need capacity building in the local authority. I need to have mobility. I need to point them to the next step to say, come on, separate your waste at source. Company A will come and get this type of waste, company B and the likes. But my community hasn't yet come to terms with the fact that they need to pay for garbage. So I need intervention and help in this. If I have to deliver to them a clean and green environment, I need capacity building, I need funding, because I can't get that at the moment. Then also, like I mentioned earlier, my town is a mining town. So there's a lot of urbanization with the hope that people can come and get a job in the town. So we are going to have this urban poor. So the mobility and the transport system is very bad at the moment. So we need capacity building or project funding to have proper walkways, local transport system enhanced so that at least at the end of the day we can have a resilient city. So it's funding right up to the local authority as well as enhanced partnership with the private sector. But we need to be seen to be doing some basics.
Thank you very much for that. And I think often there is this idea that not always local governments know where to start when it comes to the partnership with the private sector. But you have already mentioned, I know that I need to do certain steps.
Yes.
I need to do my legwork. I just have to unlock that capacity to learn exactly how do I get there. So I think this is an important element. On the other side, although, there are also challenges sometimes with not only the public sector understanding what the private sector needs to do to starting, but also with the private sector understanding what a local government wants to do. So Mark, I know one of the things that you highlight often is the cherry picking of projects, right? So can I ask you to elaborate a little bit about how you feel that we need to move on with the next steps when it comes, for example, to working with the private sector, and what are still the challenges that you frankly see out there to accelerate this process?
So I think there's probably three things that I'll mention very quickly. The first is that I think we need just generally the private sector to move more to circular economy models. And by this, I mean, for example, providing heat as a service or providing mobility as a service, so that the private sector retains ownership of the product and hires it out to the citizen on an affordable basis. Because I think this will see us move to a much more decarbonised model much more quickly. That's the first. So I want to see more different innovative business models that again allow us to invest now and get return in the long term. The second is around devolution of powers, as I think one of the mayors said, to local level for some things. So I think all of us globally are in the state now where we need national actors to work with local actors in a very cohesive way. There are some things that national government does really well, laws and regulations generally. But if you really want to see wider socio-economic impact and benefit of a just transition to a decarbonised economy, then it really needs to be instigated, in my view, at the local level, because it's only at the local level that you will see the interaction between the built environment, the transport infrastructure, the energy infrastructure, and indeed the natural infrastructure. It's only you can bring this together, and as you decentralise the energy system, you also decarbonise it. So I think there needs to be much more cohesive working between the local government and the national government, each doing the best thing that they have most control over. And then finally, I think around how we move forward together, there is something about creating trusted partnerships over time. So there are some private sector companies that my city is working with. My mayor's over in Japan at the moment, talking to a Japanese city, but also some Japanese manufacturers around how we can look to bring more of their heat pumps into Greater Manchester and do so at a cost which is acceptable, so that it reduces the barriers, the financial barriers to uptake of that technology, which is vital to get us to our decarbonisation target. There's those sorts of partnerships with the public sector, which can benefit private sector because it gives surety and longevity over sales. But for the public sector, we need more of these because we need to be able to competitively assess which are the best and make sure that we're getting the best value for what is taxpayers' dollars, basically. So they're the three things that I would highlight with you.
Thank you very much for your insights on that, and in particular, I think the point you made on being able to utilize and to leverage multi-level governance of a way to set regulations that are both set in a trajectory, right, for the public sector as well as for the private sector to really know where we are all heading together. I think that's an essential element, and I think it was mentioned by most people on this panel. But also the importance of trusted partnership. And Jorn, I will go to you because this is a little bit what we are trying to do by cooperating together between KPMG and the Urban Transition Mission. So if you can elaborate a little bit on why you felt that it's important to have these trusted partnerships, and now, a little bit of our joint vision on this specific point.
Well, I think it's easy to drop, of course, company labels, but I think it's more important that there's indeed that personal trust, because sometimes you feel, how am I going to bring that in my organization, knowing that's also for them beyond their comfort zone? So I think it's there finding those common solutions. And when I heard Mark talk about circularity, I want to reframe that maybe as a whole systems approach. And that's where, for me, the link is to the core human needs. To really understand whether you're a public sector or a private sector, in the end, you benefit from that urban ecosystem where there's access to so many services and they all have a value. And I think it's important for the mission, and that's where my passion still is, that I still believe that many of the solutions are already available. They might not be perfect, but they're available. How do we better learn from one another to make sure that what's already available, that we can better understand how can I transfer that to my context? Because no city is the same. We cannot compare global north, global south, big and small cities. So how do we transfer best practice, but also how do we scale? And we talk a lot about scaling, and it's easy to say, but it's really to understand how do we get a larger volume in the market to either get, I think, better technology penetration, to have a better price, and therefore make the transition more affordable and more inclusive, or also to understand where do we want to see the future, and can we use that market volume to drive new solutions if they don't yet exist. And I think there's really important that public and private sector starts talking early enough, whether it's on waste management or other solutions, to say, this is what we try to solve, what is today already available, what is already affordable, and what is needed to deploy it. And to really take it from that picture as an entry point into that whole systems approach, and then to say, what is the larger landscape that needs to be put in place to make it happen. But again, as you said, it's bringing those cities together in the first cohort, and it's nice to see that Chefchaouen and other cities pick up that responsibility and say, let's make it happen, and to make the cohort grow, and then to say, what are those common challenges that we all have, and to define them not at a high sectoral level, but to really see whether it's landfills, whether it's like social housing and high-rise, go to that level where we can say, this is something we can relate to, and try and find business and value models that relate to that operational level. But let's find them together.
Thank you very much. I believe Mark needs to leave us, so I would like to officially thank all of our panelists, both here and online. It's 7 a.m. there, so maybe now 8, but thank you, Mark, for connecting. Have a great rest of your day. And please give a big round of applause to the panelists here. So, you want to say something? He has to run. Sorry. We will take a picture, but in a nutshell, I think we have an overarching shared understanding that there is an urban opportunity here, and understanding that we all want to see things developing and accelerating in a systemic approach to make sure that we are not only leveraging the potential of our joint policies and measures, but also really responding effectively to the needs to the core human needs of our citizens. We also talked about the importance of partnerships to creating this trust and to opening up conversations and to kind of pulling together our forces at different stages of the evolution of these of our measures and policies. We talked about planning, data access. We talked about engaging partners, private sectors and others at different stages of the process to co-create the opportunity for scaling up these different projects at a larger level, and making sure that we are also making an impact not only in our community, but in community across the board. Finally, this was a session about multi-level governance. I think it is important to remind ourselves that it will not be possible to achieve any of this if we don't have a clear signal that across level we want to work all together to empower and to enable these transitions on the floor. So let's keep up with the conversation, and let's think about next steps. I think that's the very important element. Let's continue to think about the next steps. Thank you for joining us today, and looking forward to continue the conversation.